CTTB. Music Podcast.
Oh, the weather outside is quite mild for the time of year. Apparently, there definitely is two old blokes do podcasts.
Stop it.
As Pete gets his glasses out to match the other person getting his glasses out.
I just read reading glasses, it's fine. Oh my god,
yeah.
Seriously. How long have we been doing this?
I don't know, but it's Christmas already.
Now we can mark it in glasses.
Yes.
Hello, it's Christmas already. I'm feeling festive and I can't see, so I'm wearing my glasses.
And luckily, we're doing no festive albums.
I'm so relieved by that.
Yeah. Back to the usual, Bublé, Casey Musgraves. You can't sort it. Anyhow, what we are doing is Linkin Park from Zero, Poppy, Negative Spaces, the Pixies, The Night the Zombies Came, Kim Deal, Nobody Loves You More, and Lauren Mayberry, Vicious Creatures.
None of that sounds festive.
Possibly,
Bliss.
yeah, possibly because none of it is festive, Pete.
Amazing. Great.
So we start with the 8th studio album from Linkin Park. We've reviewed one of their albums previously. Their 4th album, 1,000 Suns, back on podcast 11, 2010.
God. Oh my god. That's a long time ago.
It is a long time ago.
Oh my god. How did we like it?
I didn't go and check.
Did we wear glasses?
We didn't. Obviously, the band have made changes. Tough decision whether or not to continue when a key member leaves or dies. Obviously, in this instance, they've left it 7 years since lead singer Chester Bennington took his own life in 2017. And then they've made the other brave decision to return with a female vocalist.
Yes.
Emily Armstrong, who was apparently the singer with a band called Dead Sarah, who I wasn't aware of.
No.
As with not many bands have replaced their singers with members of the opposite sex. Sneaker Pimps always stood out for me back in the day.
Yes, but back in the day.
Started off with Kelly Alley as singer on their debut album, then replaced her with the guitarist Chris Gorner.
I preferred the first album.
Yes.
Yeah.
No, it is the one that most people...
I know.
And death metal band Arch Enemy also replaced their original vocalist Johan Lever with Angela Gossow. And also, for me personally, I remember back in the kind of mid-80s, when David Lee Roth first left Van Halen, Eddie Van Halen apparently asked Patti Smythe, of ex-Patti Smythe and Scandal, now unfortunately probably better known as being Mrs. John McEnroe than actually an artist in her own right. If she would take on the role as their lead singer, but apparently she turned him down due to a variety of reasons, and Sammy Hagar eventually took over. So anyway, Linkin Park, back 7 years without doing anything, female singer. Has it worked? Has it changed? Do you like it? Blah, 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 etc., etc., etc.
Has it worked? Yes. Has it changed? Oh my god, it was 2010, I can't recall. What was your third question? Is it worth it?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, this is a great rock album. It's a great rock album. It's a great rock album. It's a great LP. It's a brilliant, sort of solid, in sort of the traditional sense, LP, long player, on the turntile. It works. It's a balanced record, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
It's balanced between the vocalists and the musical styles. It has sweeping synths. It has raucous guitars. It has banging rhythms and drums. And its overall length, which is short, critical,
Woohoo!
adds to the pace of the album. It's a good rock album, this. If you want to just rock on, it's fantastic. It hits, in terms of the album itself, it hits a really strong middle section too, which is unusual because normally I'm on here going, the start was brilliant, the end was brilliant.
Yeah.
And there's a particular flow of tracks in the middle, over each other, casualty, overflow. That's when this is when the album grabbed me. It was in that midsection, weirdly. I was just like, I heard the beginning, I thought, yeah, strong beginning, still good. And then it's that midsection, I thought, oh my god, this is quite good. quite good. This is very good. I'm quite enjoying this. I'm actually really enjoying this, and I think that they are too. So much so, there's an amazing in the middle of the album. There's an amazing turn of the cassette sound effect.
Yes,
that really got me. That got me. You had me at that. If I just skipped to that point in the album without listening to any of it, I'd be like, oh, I see what you've done there. Yeah, you got me at the turn of the cassette sound effect at the midpoint. Really enjoyed that. So it has that. It speaks to that generation of fans, I guess.
Yeah.
Standout tracks for me, I've mentioned a few there already. I also liked Cut the Bridge, which I think is quite early on. It's like the third or fourth track. Especially the chorus. This is Cut the Bridge. Yeah.
That's interesting because
that's
listed in my thing as some missteps for me. Cut the bridge.
That's the pop one.
Just a bit naff.
It's the pop one. It's the naff one. It's the naff pop one. I enjoyed that. That's my review. Over to you.
Yeah, I mean, I'm mostly in agreement, I think. I do think actually it starts off strong, but you're saying, you usually say that. Emptiness Machine is immediately kind of classic. In fact, the first three tracks are all kind of fit in, I think, to the classic Linkin Park template kind of thing. You know, Mike Shinoda rap bits and then the vocalist coming in. And it immediately feels like a Linkin Park album, particularly circa kind of Meteor era, which was, I think, Meteor the second album, third album maybe. And I think what the album actually does succeed in doing is capturing that early Linkin Park vibe, whilst also not just being a lazy kind of retro retread of what they've done. So you have, other old school influence tracks like Heavy as the Crown, which is possibly the most Linkin Park song on the Linkin Park album. Then Two-Faced and something else that I can't remember the title of. But I actually think the standout track of the album is actually Over Each Other.
Yeah.
Which is more musically a pop song, essentially. But lyrically I like it because as the thing goes, because you won't let me breathe, and I'm not ever right. All we are is talking over each other. And I like the choice to make the title Over Each Other, not Talking Over Each Other, as it rightly leaves both statements to exist within the same song, which I think is actually quite a clever move. Quite like one of the other pop songs on it, Stained, and ends with a very good Linkin Park style ballad, Good Things Go. Like I said, I didn't really like Cut to the Bridge, bizarrely. But overall, and speaking as somebody who still thinks their debut album, Hybrid Theory, is a work of genius, this one, in our old default terms, pretty solid rock album.
Pretty solid.
Really enjoyable.
Agree, yes.
We move on to the third time we've reviewed Poppy. This is Pete's going, really? Yeah. Get some more embarrassing than that. So this is the sixth album.
Sorry, Poppy.
We reviewed a fourth album, Flux, on podcast 8 2021, where interestingly we also reviewed Chvrches' Screen Violence.
Oh, I see where you're going there.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And also the previous Halsey album, given that we reviewed Halsey just last time out.
Wow.
That was mostly a pop punk album, which we also thought was solid. The fifth album, Zig, we reviewed on podcast 1 of this year as a carryover from last year.
God.
Which was a more synth-based pop rock album. Pete has no recollection of this at all. And we were also positive about that and a willingness to experiment, calling it not bad at all, but in a good way.
All right, that sounds like a classic Pete.
Yeah. So we're at album number 6.
Right.
Disappointingly not called Zag.
Oh.
Which again finds us in a wonderfully eclectic mood, with the focus definitely back towards metal, I think, on this album.
Yes.
Especially at the start, the first few tracks, which basically smack you about the face with some serious guitars and some growls.
No.
Opens with very much a track that's in the Nin industrial side of things, with Have You Had Enough? Then moves on to be fair, a kind of Linkin Park-esque song, The Cost of Giving Up, before going full Slipknot, perhaps more Spirit Box of the modern thing with "They're All Around Us," which I have to say I absolutely love. And then you got a bit, and then just when you think you've got the whole thing pegged, "Crystallized" comes along, which is kind of Lady Gaga Grimes-esque 80s kind of pop song. Remind me of Flashdance for some reason.
What a feeling.
And not a guitar in sight. After that, we kind of flip back and forward between slightly more rocky, slightly more poppy, slightly more... so Vital is top draw Avril Lavigne. Push Go reminded me of Republica. Nothing channeled Evanescence. And The Centre's Falling Out is just scream metal at its finest. And then the title track, which is possibly my favourite track on the album, is a perfect pop rock song. It did remind me of Whole Celebrity Skin. And again, it got to the end of the album, and I found myself once again being in full admiration for Poppy as one of those grey list of modern artists who doesn't feel there's anything wrong with throwing in different genres on a record and it being a weird thing. So all hail the rise of the genre fluid artist. Is it a brilliant record? No. Is it quite enjoyable? Yeah.
That point you just made there about it being a genre-free artist or a genre-free album, I think that's one of them. I'm going to say the opposite by the time we get to the end of this podcast.
It is more metal than anything else.
I'm going to flag that, but at this point I'm going to say it being a genre-free album is probably one of the more frustrating aspects of it. Because I listened to it immediately after Linkin Park, and as it was, and as it is, I should say, the result of this might come across a little bit negative because I think Linkin Park sort of nail it.
Okay, that's fair enough.
I'm not sure where we are here with Poppy, but certainly the beginning of the album, all sorts of merges into one, and I actually quite like that at that point. At that point, it's fine. I dislike the opening track, Have You Had Enough? And I'd almost given up on the whole album. But then we hit, and I think you've mentioned it, Crystallized.
Yeah.
The big dance floor number.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, this is where we should be going. Which sounds like it could come from a different album and band altogether, which it probably does. And then this is similarly followed by Vital, and Push Go, which again, different, but again, sort of drive forward that sort of sense of momentum. After that, admittedly, I struggle again. The album, it has that streaming age deficiency in that here's a collection of songs by an artist. That's not a dig at Poppy. That's a dig at anyone that does this. As opposed to here's an album.
I can no. It does make sense, and I can get where you're coming from, because part of me feels there's always part of me that feels that way as well, whether something hangs together as an album and stuff like that. But I think, and the argument is probably not, but I think what the modern music world does, because it's we're basically a playlist world,
yes,
is actually gives people more freedom to do this kind of record and kind of go, you know what?
I know.
I
know exactly. Yeah.
Whatever the fuck I want on tracks, and
creatively
because people
speaking,
are just going to pick the track they want, put it on a playlist, and it's
creatively speaking, I'm just going to do whatever the fuck I want. Imagine how much more interesting Oasis could have been. Don't at me. But it's just like, you know, I get it completely. And you know what? I'm going to completely contradict myself, because a couple of albums from now, I'm going to say complete opposite. But on this one, I'm saying, nah, I didn't quite sit with me. It is more thrash, but I found the more electronic bits, the experimental bits, perhaps more interesting. I agree with you, though. I also really like the title track, Negative Spaces.
Yeah.
Liked it a lot.
We move on to the 10th album from the Pixies, which doesn't seem a lot, really. It has to be said. Or 10th album if you count. If you count their, I enjoy the 10th if you count their mini LP, Come On Pilgrim from '87.
Glad we got that nailed down.
Band's first new music since 2022's Doggerel. we last reviewed them on podcast 5 2014 for Indie Cindy, which was their 5th album, and the album that was their comeback album at the time, and the first Pixies album not to feature a certain Kim Deal, who we'll be getting onto very shortly.
That 5th album,
Yeah.
and we're on their 10th.
Yeah.
Just doing the maths.
Exactly, yeah. So, the Pixies, they're back. Again, with all these kind of things, part of me is going, do we care? Because, first 4 Pixies albums, great. Almost genre defining.
Genre defining.
Defining.
So how do you come back from that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Then you do a 5th, which we review, and then there's been 5 since. So where does this one sit? Well, this is a Pixies album. You will like it if you like the Pixies. It's very much comparable. Hang on, let me pause. It's very much comparable to last month's Cure review. And go back to podcast whatever number previously.
9, I think it is.
Podcast 9 of 2024. Thank you, listener. And Scott. It's very comparable to that. This is a very well produced album with songs that you will like if you like the Pixies, and maybe you will like these songs if you don't like the Pixies, because this is a very good album. So what's my problem with it? For me, it's a solid listen. It's a good one, but there are no standout moments for me here, and I've listened to this 2-3 times, maybe more. And I really sort of struggled to find the standout moments. And that's why I sort of draw this comparable with the Cure album last month. The Cure album was brilliant. It was the first album in however X long years. But where are the standout moments? I mean, I liked Jane, The Night the Zombies Came.
Yes.
I liked Oyster Beds.
Yes.
And I liked the slow one, Mercy Me. But other than that, I can't sort of say, yeah, that was a great album and these are the tracks you need to listen to. And I'm sorry for that. It's a great album. It's a solid album, but it's not a standout album for me.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Yeah.
I think I'm glad they're still about. I'm glad they're still doing what they're doing.
Absolutely.
And there is some, as you say, there's some classic Pixies stuff here.
Yes,
So, as you say,
it's in there.
Yeah, as you say, Jane, Oyster Beds. I also thought Primrose, the opening track, and Hypnotised, which also had a bit of a kind of Ramones thing going on as well, which I quite liked. But as you say, it's all kind of like perfectly solid, but it doesn't really lack any of the raw passion and genre-defining inventiveness of those original 4 albums, which is fine, because frankly, why
That's a high hill to climb.
Yeah, exactly. Why should it? And that's the problem when you are any band like the Pixies, that has literally been copied and influenced so many other bands since.
Yeah.
It's like you can't keep reinventing the wheel. But I also agree with you with it's whilst it was on,
It's all right.
I was perfectly enjoying it, quite happy.
Yeah.
But then again, similarly as you're saying, there wasn't a great deal with me thinking, there's things here that are going to draw me back into definitely replaying this album again in the next month. But saying that, Motorola really got under my skin on the final play of this album this afternoon, and I was humming that on my walk to the pub earlier on. So, who knows?
Cool. Yeah.
Moving on to Kim Deal.
Yeah.
Debut solo album, amazingly, from the ex-Pixies bassist and Breeders co-founder.
Interesting left turn here.
Yeah, and this is also... I don't...
Oh! Apology, listener.
Yes. The listener's just gone deaf.
Sorry about that. No, I weren't.
That'll pay attention to anyone that actually does listen. If they got to that bit,
Did you get to the literal mic drop?
that'll be a test.
The literal mic drop.
That people are going to go, yes. Did you listen to last podcast? Oh yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, I got to the mic drop.
Yeah. Did you listen to the bit when it went wrong? Yeah. What was that? Don't know. Anyway,
Sorry.
this
Carry
album,
on.
Kim Deal. This was actually a bit of a surprise to me musically, because it has a kind of like 50s, 60s kind of swooning kind of almost kind of runettes without the Phil Spector kind of effect thing going on for like half the album, and then the other half of the album is more kind of more what you'd kind of expect if you're a Pixies or Breeders fan kind of thing. In fact, the sound was reminiscent, particularly on the kind of 50s, 60s kind of stuff of Cowboy Junkies album Trinity Sessions, and so it's quite it's quite an interesting listen. Not sure it totally worked for me, but and I have to confess, where it worked for me most was actually not on what should be the more interesting bits, but was actually where I was more on safe ground and thinking, ooh, sounds a bit like the Pixies, or sounds a bit like the Breeders. So things like Crystal Breath, Disobedience, A Good Time Pushed. Although I did like the bit of rapping on Big Ben Beat as well, which I thought was really, really good. And also I had to suppress an urge to sing Blondie's Sunday Girl every time I played the song Coast.
Right.
He gets towards the chorus and he just I had to stop stuff. So I'm gonna be slightly negative on this album in a kind of saying, but while saying it's solid, because I do think it is solid, and she is someone that deserves to be worshipped. Just for the fact she wrote Gigantic, which is my favourite Pixies song, and the output of the Breeders alone, and it's great that she's still making music, and I wanted to make more music because these are the kind of people we should be playing more music to. So with the Pixies, it's a bit like the Pixies album for me. I kind of thought it was perfectly fine, and there were moments that I really enjoyed, but in the end, I was thinking, is there anything here that's going to make me more likely to put this on rather than put an old Pixies album on or an old Breeders album on? And the answer to that was probably not.
I agree. This is a really interesting record. There's the Pixies, Pixie stuff. There's the Pixies stuff, but there's also that sort of wonder where it does drift from genre to genre. Here I go to contradict myself to earlier in the podcast, where you go from classic country to something that just sounds like experimental beats, to something that is your sort of classic indie, and so forth. But here somehow, as opposed to earlier, the contrast works, and I think that sort of laying down the first few tracks again. There's a successful pattern of laying this down, and I think there's something quite sane about sane's probably the right word, sane about the sort of marriage between the indie and the drums across the album. But the drums obviously go off in one direction, the indie goes off in another direction. I actually like that. So Crystal Breath, you've mentioned, one of my highlights, but equally Are You Mine, which is again got a completely different place. Wish I Was another one. But then I really had a thing for Summerland. That's the big number with the strings.
Yes.
Which is so far off any genre of any album on this podcast.
It's a nice track, isn't it?
It's very nice. It's very swish, is how I think of it. It fits together well. So for me, I really enjoyed this. But again, that sort of sense of where it sits kicks in, but maybe don't think too hard about it on this occasion.
Yeah.
It's alright. It's alright. It's alright. It's a good album.
Okay, so we finished the Christmas festivities with the debut album from Chvrches lead singer Lauren Mayberry, Vicious Creature. As I mentioned earlier in the podcast, we last reviewed her band back on podcast 8, 2021. For fans of the band, of which we are, apparently they have signed a new deal and do plan to reunite at some point, but this was an opportunity for her to do her own thing and, in her own words, not just make a crap knockoff Chvrches record. Has she succeeded, Pete?
How many times have you heard the lead singer go off and say that? I'm not going to do what Depeche Mode do, says Dave Gahan. Yeah, no, I get it. And do you know what? The further they go, usually they succeed. You're welcome, Dave. Reach out and touch him. It's a pop album.
Literally, my first words of my notes is
it's
a pop album.
It's a pop album. You know how sort of churches occupy that sort of space between pop and indie. They sort of that intellectual space between pop and indie. Lauren's really leaned into the pop element with this album, and the pop star instincts, I guess, of her as the lead singer, really come out as well. She's really gone for it. She's like, this is my opportunity to play the pop star and actually to be the front woman and be the solo pop star. And in that way, it remains, whilst it remains a somewhat more mature sound than some of the contemporaries, and particularly in the US or North American female pop star space. And I'm thinking of your Olivia Rodrigo's, your Sabrina Carpenter's and all of that. It nonetheless has that potential crossover into that mainstream space. So, oh God, I've been so negative this podcast. Whilst it's not for me, he says again, I quite enjoyed it. I can see where it's going. I liked Crocodile Tears. It has that pop bombast. It sounds like it's an out and out big pop tune. Changes Shapes and Sunday Best were also tracks that I pulled out from the list. There were tracks that I really liked as well. So yeah, nice one. Nice palate cleanser, Lauren, for fans of Chvrches.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote a pop album as my first note, but I also put in brackets, but holding on to an indie vibe. I thought actually their approach to the way the tracks, the variety of the tracks appeared, reminded me actually of Halsey. So you had the stripped back guitar based songs, so anywhere but dancing. Yeah. Pop punk on Sorry Etc. with its comments, its comment about being in a band with people and not being heard, and wanted to fit in with one of the boys. Not sure who she was talking about there. As you said, then you've got 80s influence pop, Crocodile Tears, which you've mentioned. You know, not Jimmy Nail in sight. Shame again. Back to the Linkin Park album. I like the fact that on Shame you have that kind of double meaning lyrically of the shame you feel and the sarcastic comment, what a shame kind of thing, which is straight out girl pop. And then there's a weird kind of like 2 or 3 songs that just had kind of an All Saints kind of vibe. So Something in the Air, which starts off, and then Work of Fiction, and Sunday Best, which there's more than a passing kind of like nod to Pure Shores in that song.
Oh, Pure Shores.
Love the piano ballad Mother as well, which has lovely lyrics about you know, mother-daughter relationships and how those change. So each verse is changing the kind of perspective of going from, you know, thinking your mom's to loving your mom to hating your mom to perhaps going back to appreciate your mom again, which I quite liked. And so for me, this album, bizarrely, this was the final album I listened to today, and it's the album that's gone on the biggest journey for me in this podcast. So I was probably leaning towards being similar to your review on the first 2 listens, but I've now done another 2 listens, the final one of which was today, and the album has kind of flattened out for me, but in a good way. So I'm now thinking that this is actually a pretty good debut album, and something that I probably will listen to again.
Amazing. Great.
However, as per usual, we get to the usual boring bit and go, album of the podcast, Pete.
I struggle with this one. I struggled, I think, if you've been listening all the way along, you've probably heard me sort of mutter and moan through most of these reviews. I've probably perhaps erred on the more negative side this month, which is unusual for me. So where do I land? I think Linkin Park is good. I think Lauren Mayberry is also great for the reasons you've outlined. So for me, it's between the two of those.
I would... yeah. I've... Initially, until today, I was umming and ahhing between Linkin Park and Poppy. And like I said, Lauren Mayberry's kind of like come in as they... in the end, to kind of like try and snatch glory away from everybody else. So I'm actually going to give it to the debutante.
Ooh.
And say the Lauren Mayberry one is my favourite album.
There we go. Let's go with that.
Podcast.
Fantastic.
If you want to find out what our favourite albums of 2024 were, you're going to have to wait till the start of 2025.
That'll be a much more positive podcast.
When we'll actually get round to that, as well as reviewing. Actually, I think we'll probably do the same things we did last year. So we'll probably also review a couple of albums from this year that we've missed.
Oh yes.
That apparently we should have reviewed because everyone has said they were wonderful and we didn't go around to review them.
I'm sorry, Emily, we're not doing Sabrina Carpenter. Or maybe we are.
Well, that did get quite good reviews, actually. To be fair to Miss Carpenter.
Yeah. No, that's brilliant. I'm sure that'll be a fantastic and much more positive listen to which to begin your new year. Which all that remains to say is Merry Christmas.
Also, prepare for Come Taste the Band taking over the world in 2025 when we decide to do something different, maybe.
He's not joking.
The CTTB Music Podcast is a Vineland production.